Hey folks, welcome to another Triple T Thursday. For those just joining us, that's tools, tips, and talk, where we'll discuss info for the knife maker. In today's episode, we're going to continue our beginner series and go more into the forging aspect. So stay tuned, let's go over the forge and take a look.
So before we light it, I figured I would explain all the aspects of the forge. So first off, you want a forge that's a decent width, wide enough that you can get blades in, of course. Plus, if you're going to do Damascus, you want that wide enough. This is a pretty big forge. It's got about an 8-inch wide opening. I like to have a nice shelf on the front to rest things on, so that's pretty convenient. Another important aspect of the forge is a way to close it up. Either this one happens to have these nice rolling doors that I built for it. If you don't have doors, just stack up soft fire bricks in front of it. You need a way to keep the heat in. This forge also has a back door with another shelf in case I have really long work. And then this guy just hangs on the back and I can put it up one level here, and then things can hang out the bottom. So let's talk about burners. There's really two kinds of forges. There's forges with this kind of burner, referred to as a venturi, and I'll explain what that means in a second. And then there's what I have here, which is a blower down here, over there, which actually blows air up this pipe down into this burner. And the gas is injected in here, mixes, there's a little baffle in here, mixes, and then comes out the burner. You'll notice this burner is quite big, okay? Instead of one big opening like this one, it has 15 or 20 small holes in it. This is called a ribbon burner. This just distributes the heat better. And there's some other aspects to it we'll get into. But first, let's talk about what most people are going to start with, which is the venturi burner. So let's talk about this venturi burner. All this is really is a piece of, I think this is 1/4 inch pipe, maybe 3/8, I forget, threaded in this bowl here. And then you can't really see it, but there's a MIG tip from a MIG welder threaded into this, so it's got a tiny little opening, and that's what's spraying the gas down the pipe. The reason these are shaped this way is a venturi system works by the gas spraying. The gas comes out of here at a pretty good volume, and the gas flowing down sucks air in, and it spirals. That's what a venturi means. It's spiraling by forcing gas or air down a pipe like this with a larger opening. It's going to suck air in behind it. So the great thing about these is you don't need a blower because the force of the gas is going to suck air in. The downside is you need a large volume of gas. That gas has to be going at a pretty high pressure in order to suck in the air. So venturi systems take a lot more gas than a blown air system. And especially if you have 2 or 3 of these running, you'll be running your propane bottle probably 25 psi if you got 3 of these running, which is a lot. I run this whole forge at about 3 or 4 psi. So there are some other good things about a venturi system. You don't need power. The ribbon burner and the blower, of course, is powered, so you need power to get the blower to move. And if the blower stops, that means you're building up gas in this line and it's not blowing into the forge. And it can obviously combust. So if the power ever goes out, you really need a special solenoid that kicks off the gas automatically. I never leave the room when this thing is running exactly for that reason. I do not have a solenoid in that. So these are relatively easy to make. You just need a larger nozzle at the bottom, which is going to open it up, and the gas will come out of here, the flame rather. So I'm not going to light this one, but I'm sure you will have seen these before. The other good part of a ribbon burner and a blown air system is that a forced air system, you can control the air and the gas separately. On a Venturi system, I mean, the pressure is what's controlling the gas. Here you have a needle valve up here that you can control the gas, and then this gate valve is controlling how much air is coming from the blower. So you get a lot more fine-tuned control on this. If you think about it, a propane forge is really just kind of like your barbecue, your propane barbecue, a glorified propane barbecue that can go really, really hot. That's really all it is. You want some really good insulation on the inside. This one has soft fire brick, and then there's actually hard fire brick encased in some other insulation here, just so I can save the bottom, but we'll get into that another time. The gas is going to come out of the ribbon burner. So let's light it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the blower first. I'm going to turn on the gas so that I know it's flowing. And I have another gate valve over here, and I'm going to turn that on. I like to start the forge with a propane torch like this. And I'm going to just put it in. Then I will turn the gas valve on, and it'll start injecting gas into the forge, and this will light right away. One thing to note, when this thing lights, it almost 100% of the time will blow this torch out. Make sure that you remember to turn the gas off on the torch, because sometimes you will forget. My son forgot once, and we were smelling gas for an hour, and we couldn't figure out why. It's because this was on. Difference on the ribbon burner. All the small flames inside instead of the one big flame. So I turned this off just so I can talk. There's a few things I want to explain about flame and about control of your forge. So one thing that a lot of people fail to do is let their forge fully heat up. The inside of the forge should be glowing orange. And you'll see, and people call it dragon's breath. They see the flames coming out of the forge that are very orange. When you first start it, the flames are going to be blue. As it gets hotter and hotter, all of the insides of the forge will be red, and that flame coming out will be much more orangey, and that's what you want. So if you're still seeing blue flames, let it heat up a little more. That's what it looks like when the forge is fully up to temperature. Orange flames coming out the front. If you have a Venturi system, you're going to tend to have more flames coming out the front and the back. And that's because in a Venturi system, the way it draws the air in, the air and the gas doesn't mix until it's inside the forge. So, and sometimes it doesn't mix enough. So that's why you'll see these really large dragon's breath coming out the front and the back. On a forced air system, the gas and the air is mixing in the pipe, and it's mixing in the baffle in the ribbon burner, which is why it's much more efficient, and you'll get a much less of a flame coming out the front. The only time I usually have flame coming out of the front is when I'm forge welding, because I want to have a very gas-rich system. And if you think about it, the gas will collect up inside, and if you're seeing flames on the outside of the forge, that means the gas isn't getting enough air until it escapes here, and that's why it's combusting outside of the forge. And that's what you want when you're forge welding. You don't want a lot of oxygen and air inside the forge, because that's where your billet is. This particular forge has the burner at the top pointing straight down. And that has some pros and cons. It's a lot easier to build that way. But the downside is the flames are pointing right in the center. So when I use this forge, and this one is going full blast, especially a billet, not necessarily a big piece of Damascus, but a billet, I will not put it right underneath that flame. If you just keep it under there, you're just going to burn the carbon out of it. If you're going to have a forge like this, take your blade and lean it up against either side, and that will heat it, and then I just flip sides. So you just have to be more conscious of it. A lot of forge systems, especially the round ones, will have the burner at an angle so that the flames swirl around, and that's a really good design. All right, we've talked about the forge, how to get it lit, and how to control it. Now let's talk a little bit more about some other tools. Obviously, you're going to need a hammer. This is a rounding hammer. It's got the flat side and it's got a round side. The reason that's important is when you're hitting metal with the round side, you're spreading metal out. A hammer like this, when you hit it, it's spreading the metal in all directions. Okay, which is great. When you need to lengthen something, you can hit it with the rounding hammer and you're actually spreading it out, as opposed to the flat side where you're just kind of flattening it. Now, I've seen people try to stretch something out with a flat hammer. It just takes forever because you're not spreading the metal out. So that's why it's important to have a round face on at least either a separate hammer or have two heads on your hammer. Rounding hammers for forging are quite expensive. A hammer like this to buy is between $100 and over $200. They're quite expensive. Again, my buddy Spencer from Heavy Forge sent this to me, and I cherish this hammer and I use it all the time. But if you don't have friends like that, what you can do is just go to Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever your big box store is, buy a hammer like this. And you have to just dress it up, which means just grind the edge around here on one side just so that it's got a little bevel here, because you don't want sharp edges, because when you hit, you're going to leave a crescent in there. And then on the other side, you're going to really grind it down so that it's more round. And there you have a makeshift rounding hammer. Okay, this is a 3-pound hammer. That's kind of heavy. That's about a 2.5-pound hammer, which is a good size. Another type of hammer, like this, again, I rounded the face on this one. This is a cross peen hammer. So the peen, okay, it only goes in two directions. So when I'm hitting something, it's only spreading the metal this way. Okay, and this is also a very sharp edge. So when I'm doing, you saw me in the last video on the 01, forging the 01 Skinner, I use this on the finger choil to spread that out. This is also a 4-pound sledge, so when I want to do some heavy work, I'll use the 4-pounder. Okay, let's talk about tongs. So I will tell you, you do not have to have blacksmith tongs. The first thing I did when I very first started, I had a really long set of needle nose pliers, and then I would kind of pull it out, and I would use vice grips and just clamp down and use vice grips, and that worked okay. It was just a little fiddly getting them in and out, and they're short, so it gets hot. Let's talk about blacksmith tongs and the different types. So these are called wolf jaw tongs. These are just great all-around tongs for moving stock, picking things up. These are not great at holding stock as you're hammering, just because the stock can move around like this in the jaws. What's really good, especially for knife makers, the one I would recommend the most are these offset tongs. So when you put a blade in here, it actually hangs out, so you can get really long stock and hold it, and it's offset. And this is really good because once it's in here, it doesn't move. You can hammer on it. So these are really good tongs for bladesmiths. The other tongs that I use quite a bit, probably the most, are these bolt jaw tongs. And that's primarily because I do Damascus and I weld on a little piece of rebar. So these are great for holding rebar. They're also good for holding like narrow stock or even knives that you can just hold the knife in this way, because they have like a V-bit thing here. They also, if you'll notice, they have this here, so you can actually grab something the other way. So great all-around tongs. As a bladesmith, you really don't need more than those three. There's different variations of tongs. There's another type of tong that has a flat, kind of a flat section here, and a box called box jaw tongs. Those are good for holding stock, but the only problem with those is if you have different widths of stock, you need different box jaw tongs. So that's why I like these a little better. So those three tongs, the only reason I have these tongs, which I recently got, was for doing hammer work and for other large stock. So if you're not going to be doing axes and hammers, you really don't need those. So tongs are pretty expensive. They can be 60, 70 bucks a piece for really good blacksmith tongs. You can also make your own. There's tons of videos on how to make tongs out of rebar. So if you don't want to buy them or you're just starting out, go check out those videos. The other thing you're going to need is a good set of gloves. These are just welder's gloves. These have seen better days, but you need a set of those. I typically do not use a glove on my hammer hand. I will use a glove on my tong hand to reach in and out of the forge and to hold the tongs, because sometimes even the tongs get hot. I will not typically use tongs in this hand, or sorry, tongs. I will not use a glove in this hand, or if I do, it'll be like a mechanic's glove, just so I don't get a blister sometimes from the hammer. But these kind of gloves, I just find that the hammer slips around and I don't get a good grip on the hammer. So I want to talk a little bit about hammer technique and height. I'm pretty tall, I'm 6'2", so this anvil is set pretty high. But you want the anvil so that when you're standing like this, the hammer is even. So I'm standing up and the hammer is even with the anvil. Okay, you want your full range of motion to hit on the anvil. You do not want a death grip, and this is the number one problem people get tennis elbow, is they have a death grip on the hammer. You really want a loose grip on the hammer, kind of grip it with these two fingers, and you want power, but you want accuracy. So if you grip it really, really hard, you actually have less accuracy than you do if you just relax a little bit. You definitely, I can feel my arm tighten up when I grip this really tight, but if I relax, it loosens up my arm and it's a lot easier to hit. Don't be afraid to go to a lighter hammer. Don't think that you need to use a 3 or 4 pound hammer. You're just going to tire your arm out, and that's not good. So go with a lighter hammer. Even a regular ball peen hammer is fine for some forging work. So the last tool I'm going to talk about today, which is pretty important, is a scale brush. You're going to need this when you're doing some forging, just to knock the scale off your work. If you don't do that on occasion, you're just going to keep building up so much scale that it's just hard to get off after the fact. If you just buy your thing online, most people will get this kind, which is not as good. You want to get a scale brush like this. So these are obviously much thicker, much heavier duty. You'll get a lot more scale off with something like this. The reason I have both, when I'm doing Damascus, I'll knock the heavy scale off, and then any little fine kind of powdery stuff I will take off with this brush, just so my steel is super clean when I'm doing forge welding. So I do like to have both, but this is the main one that you're going to want to use.
That's it for this episode, folks. I know you wanted to see some actual forging. We're going to get into that in the next one. But I wanted to make sure you had a good grounding of how to use the forge, knowledge about it, and the tools that you're going to need. And next time we're going to get into some forging. Thanks, folks. We'll see you on the next one.